Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Some of the greatest things that we use to this day was found purely on accident. And one of these accidents would not be for one Japanese scientist in 1893, where he would be forming some chemical compounds and he would create a crystallized compound. This crystallized compound would be what many people would refer to now as speed or crystal meth. And surprisingly enough, after its invention in 1893, it is there that governments would actually use this particular drug for ailments for a variety of different things. As after its invention, it would be used to treat not only narcolepsy, but be used as a weight loss drug. In fact, they would use the drug in World War II and issue them out to troops as a way to keep troops awake for longer periods of time. The negative effects and the addictiveness of this particular drug was crippling, not only to just soldiers, but also the nation as it was being distributed around the United States, where it would quickly be banned from the US in 1970. But even though this particular drug would be completely banned in 1970, it would not stop people from manufacturing and using this particular drug. This drug would affect communities worldwide, specifically one community in 2022, where ironically our story takes place in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Not only would Green Bay be known for various notorious things, one for being known for their cheese, but also their notorious football team, the Green Bay Packers. Unfortunately, just like various other towns and communities around the U.S., Green Bay, Wisconsin would also have a very crippling addiction to methamphetamines, which unfortunately would take place on one snowy morning, where unfortunately our story would take place on one cold morning in February 23rd, 2022. On this morning, Tara Packenick had just settled down with her boyfriend in her residence, Steve Hendricks. According to their testimonies, they had been out that night and had returned home to lay down. As they would be walking into their bedroom, Tara would actually open the basement door and find that the lights were on inside the basement. Realizing that her son, Shad Therian, was down in the basement with his girlfriend and would quickly close the door so not to disturb them, and then would return to bed. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, Tara would be awoken by hearing sounds of her front door being shut. A few moments afterwards, she would hear a car starting up and quickly taking off. Tara would speculate and assume to herself that this was possibly Shad Therian's girlfriend leaving for the night. It's there that she would get up and she would begin walking down to the downstairs basement to check on her son. Tara would quickly become extremely puzzled as she would go downstairs to the downstairs basement to see a very disheveled basement room with no sign of her son anywhere. But she would find one thing that was completely out of place, which would be at the base of the steps a black bucket with a towel that was draped over the top of it. Curiosity would get the better of Tara Packenick when she would reach down and pick up the towel that was draped over the bucket and would peer inside. And it is there that she would begin screaming from the bottom of the steps for her boyfriend, Steve, to call the police. Around the same time at 3:30 in the morning, it is there that people would be coming in that would work their dispatching jobs at the Green Bay Police Department, preparing themselves for what would have been to themselves a very boring morning, but would quickly be disturbed by the phone call that would come through the line at 3:35. Up until this point, everyone was pretty much assuming that the only type of excitement that would be going down would be the Green Bay Police Department scraping the roads of the snow that had just fallen down. At 3:35 in the morning, 911 dispatcher would receive a call from Steve Hendricks, and Steve Hendricks, who was extremely disoriented at the time, would tell the 911 dispatcher, "I need one of your officers to come to 829 Stony Brook." There, Steve Hendricks would tell the 911 dispatcher, "I was just woken up by my friend who swears to me that she has found her son's severed head in the basement." Completely shocked by this following statement, the dispatcher would reply to Steve Hendricks and say, "Excuse me, can you repeat yourself?" To where Steve Hendricks would tell the dispatcher again that he had just been woken up by his girlfriend, Tara Packenick, and had told him that she had found her son's severed head in the basement in a black bucket. Her son would be 24-year-old Shad Thurian. The dispatcher would then ask Steve Hendricks if he knew for sure if it actually was a head in the bucket of the basement. To where Steve Hendricks would say, "I don't know. I'm just a little freaked out. Can you please send police officers over to this residence?" They would eventually talk Steve Hendricks into actually going down into the basement to actually confirming if there actually was a severed head in a bucket in the basement. But another unfortunate thing about Steve Hendricks is he didn't have the best eyesight, and he would go down to this basement to confirm for the 911 dispatcher and would tell the dispatcher on the phone that he couldn't really make out what was inside the bucket, as it was not just one thing, but he could tell that there were several things inside the bucket and couldn't make out. But he was freaked out enough that he wanted police to show up to the residence. They would eventually get a very distressed Tara Packenick to actually get on the phone to confirm with what Steve Hendricks was saying, and she would get on the phone and tell the dispatcher and say hello, and the dispatcher would be like, "What seems to be the trouble?" To where Tara Packenick would tell the dispatcher exactly what I just told you. "My son's head is in the bucket of the basement." To where the dispatcher would ask, "Well, where's the rest of the body?" To where Tara would respond, "I don't know." And with good reason, it is around this time that 911 dispatchers would send out 2 police officers to investigate what was going on 829 Stony Brook. This would be 2 officers, Officer Warnish and Officer Plunkey. One of the police officers would be upstairs talking to Steve Hendricks and Tara Packenick, while the other officer would actually go downstairs to the basement to investigate what was going on, and would notice a very disheveled basement, to where he too would also notice the bucket lying on the ground. It would be shortly afterwards that his partner would actually join him down there, and they would begin taking these flashlights, and they would just take the towel off of the bucket, and they would peer inside this bucket, to where one of the police officers would tell his other police officers to come over and go, "Is that what I think it is?" This would be very shocking for the police, as Schmurders was not a regular occurrence in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And upon going to the home on 829 Stony Brook, it is there that they just wanted to confirm that neither Steve Hendricks or Tara Packenick were disoriented or hallucinating by any form. And it wasn't until these police investigators that would go downstairs and quickly realize that there was no hallucination, and there was, in fact, indeed, a severed head in a bucket in the basement, with no sign of the body around, until they would do a quicker learn and dive around the basement. The 2 officers would actually walk over to the bed to see if they could just see if there was any sign of the rest of the body, and they would go over to the bed, and they would quickly realize there was just something very strange about the bed. It just didn't seem right, and they would quickly take the blankets and the pillows off of the top mattress. And shockingly, the police would realize that the entire mattress had been completely caked and soaked with blood, which would raise the next question: if this is Shad Thurian, where is the rest of him? The police would do more investigation inside the bucket and realize it was the severed head of Shad Thurian. And it wasn't just his head inside the bucket, as they would also find a puddle of blood that was inside the bucket, as well as various different knives. There, the police would realize that these knives had been used to the point that they were completely dulled out. But the head and the knives and the blood inside the bucket would not be the only thing inside the bucket, as they would also find other body parts inside the bucket, primarily Shad Thurian's genitals. When police would ask Tara Packenick if they knew who was last with her son, she would only tell the police one thing: the last person to be with her son was his girlfriend, Taylor Coronado.